Hi there, it's Reed from Blue Bear Quilts, and this is the Out of This World quilt. It's made with a paper piecing method using freezer paper as the foundation. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do it. It makes paper piecing so easy, so let's get started. So what do we need to make the Out of This World quilt? Well, obviously we need some beautiful batik fabrics from Island Batik. This is called the Pin Dot Floral Collection. It's in beautiful shades of pink, teal, green, blue. Here we have a pink that's been outlined with light pink. You can see where it's been outlined here on the leaves, and then there are some dots, which is why it's called Pin Dot Floral. And then we have a beautiful lime with a dark background, another lime, a pink, another pink. Then we have a beautiful teal that's been that has white flowers on it. And we have pink flowers with slate blue. Then we have another lime and a beautiful teal flowers. Then we have some red flowers on a green background. Then we have a beautiful teal with some lime butterflies. And so this is just an absolutely gorgeous collection that will be beautiful in this Out of This World quilt. Now I need 20 different fabrics. So let's see how many I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I'm going to need a couple more fabrics, but basically this is the collection of fabrics that I will be using to make this quilt. And this again was the Pin Dot Floral by Island Batik Fabrics. Then of course you're going to need the pattern, and this pattern finishes at 6.5 inches. And the beautiful batiks are going to be in the white triangles, and then the dark triangles are going to have the black. And that's going to create a beautiful cascading fan effect when the block is completed and the colored batiks are spaced between the blacks. Now you're also going to need a thick postcard, something that you might have gotten in the mail, to pre-crease all of the lines on your pattern. So wherever there's a line, you're going to take and pre-crease it with the postcard, and then this will make it easier for you to determine where to place the fabrics later. And this is paper pieced foundation, and I'm using freezer paper to do that. You'll see that it's shiny on one side. That's the plastic side, and then there's a paper matte side on the other side, and that's the side that the pattern is printed onto. Now I used Reynolds freezer paper. It's important that you use the kind that says plastic coated, and what I did was pulled out sheets of this and then cut it into 8.5 inch pieces of paper, and then I ran them through my inkjet printer. Now it's important that you use an inkjet printer as opposed to a laser jet printer, as the heat of the laser jet printer might actually start to melt the plastic that's on the freezer paper. So be sure to print this using an inkjet printer. Another thing that will be really helpful is an add a quarter ruler. That will add a quarter when you want to trim the blocks up. And if you don't have that, you can use the 1/4 inch line on a regular ruler. You'll also need a good sturdy rotary cutter. And you're going to need some additional fabrics. You're going to need a nice border fabric and black, and then you'll also need this white that's like a background fabric. One other thing that could be helpful would be to have a light box. And this is optional, but what it does is it allows you to see through the paper pieced foundation so that you can determine where to place your shapes. So see, now you see that I can't really see the lines, but when I turn on this light, and I'll show it later, then you can see them and you know exactly where to place the fabric. And also the fact that you crease the lines will help you determine where to place the fabrics. If you don't have a light box, you also could hold it up to a window, and then you'd be able to see the lines through the window as well. But it is important that you make sure that you have pieces that are large enough that are covering the shapes completely, and a light box can help you do that. So now we're going to go ahead and make some blocks, and here's a couple of the blocks that have already been made, and you'll notice that both of these have the same colored fabric with black in the middle, but these half square triangles are different, and so some of the blocks are going to have a white half square triangle and some are going to have a black. Now the ones that I'm going to be showing you will all have the white half square triangle. And the other thing I did to organize this is that I labeled the fabric with how many blocks I needed with black and white half square triangles, because otherwise the block is exactly the same. So this particular color needed one with a black, which is that one, and it needed one with a white. And then I've also indicated which position they were. There's 36 blocks, and this one is in position number 14 and number 34. And I probably will have to look at the diagram to determine which one is the black one and which one is the white one. But that's one thing I do to organize these. So we need our pattern, which of course has the shapes A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you start with the A1. You start with the first one, and we're going to be working with this color now. And in the pattern, it's going to tell you the correct size to cut these strips. And yes, there will be a little bit of waste, but that's just how it is with paper piecing. And the nice thing is that you get these perfect points when you do paper piecing. But I'm going to be doing the freezer paper method, and you can see I've done quite a few blocks already with this one. I'm more than halfway done, so I've been using 3 different pieces of this that I've printed, 3 different block templates I've printed, so you actually can get quite a few more than 4. But now, one downfall to using the paper piecing method is that because you're not actually sewing the 2 fabrics together on the line, the fabric may shift a little bit. And so in order to combine blocks, like if you were to put 2 of these together and you wanted these 2 sections to match up with each other perfectly, they might not. And so what I'm doing to combat that is I'm going to put sashing strips all the way around, and then if there is any slight differences of where these points fall, it's not going to be noticeable. So the first thing we have to do is put fabric on the back of the A1. We start with A1, and so we'll flip this over, and we're going to pretend that this is the wrong side of the fabric, and so it's going to get flipped like that, so that the right side of the fabric is going to be face down when we lay this on here. So this is a batik, so it's hard to tell, but if this had a right and wrong side, this would be the right side facing down. We lay our A1 shape over it, and then we basically iron this, and I've done that on another one. And so you can see in doing that, the fabric is now staying on the paper. And you can also kind of do these by chain piecing, so when you're working with more than one of these templates at a time, I've also gone ahead and done another color, and so I've placed that on the A1 shape. So once we have it on the A1 shape, we now have to trim it up a little bit. So we take our postcard and we place it on the line between A1 and A2. And then we fold it back. And so we just have to pull the fabric a little bit so it gets off of where it's been glued to the back of the template, and push that postcard in there good. And then we're going to take our add a quarter ruler, and remember it has this little lip on the back, and that lip is going to line up right along with the edge of this template.
So it slides right up, it kind of stops right up against it. And now we're going to trim that extra off. And we'll still be able to use this piece later on. So then we take and fold this back, and now we're on to piece A2, which is a black piece. And so we're going to take a black strip, and again the measurements of what these pieces are in the pattern, and we take and line that up along the line like this. We take and line it up so that the straight edge of this black fabric is matching the straight edge of the pink fabric. And then we just want to make sure that it's going to cover this end so that when it gets folded up, it's going to cover this space right here. And on this end as well, it's going to cover that. And this piece is definitely generous enough that it is going to completely cover that black A2 shape. And then I don't want the fabrics to move when I'm sewing, so I'm going to pin. And you can just pin right through the 2 layers of fabric and also the freezer paper template. And then the beauty of this is that when we go to sew, we're now going to take and fold this back on the line between A1 and A2. And we're going to stitch right along the edge of the paper, right along the edge of the freezer paper template, that whole length of the pink fabric. So let me show you on this other one. Again, we've adhered the fabric with the right side facing up. And when it's like this, the wrong side is facing up beneath the A1 shape. We're going to take and fold this over and put our postcard in so that there's a nice firm edge for the add-a-quarter ruler to butt up against. Take our add-a-quarter ruler, line it up along that paper template, and trim this extra off. And again, we'll be able to use this later. And we're now on to the A2 piece, which is a black piece. So we'll take another black strip. If I can get one here. And we're going to again line up the straight edge of this black fabric. And you want to make sure that it's straight. So like if you're using scraps, try to have at least one edge be nice and straight so that it will line up with that straight cut that you just made. And so I'm going to line up that black with that greenish piece, just like that. And again, I'm going to pin. And the pinning is just so that the fabrics won't move around while I'm sewing. And so we're then going to take and fold this back on the line between A1 and A2. And we're going to stitch right along this green fabric, right along the edge of the freezer paper template. And we're not going to sew on the freezer paper template. We're just going to stitch right next to it. So that will be what I will show you next is how I sew right along the edge of that paper template.
So in order to sew this, I've now put it on my machine with an open-toed foot so that I can see where the edge of this paper piece template is. Then I'm going to lower my presser foot. I'm going to go needle down. I'm just going to start. I have the edge of the fabric lined up with the 2/8 inch mark on my machine, which would be a 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to start sewing slowly to make sure I clear that paper piece template. So there, I'm clear of it. Now what I'm going to do is, this should be a 1/4 inch along here. So I'm basically just going to watch this 2/8 inch line and make sure my fabric stays close to it. And then every once in a while I'll look over here to make sure that the needle is not piercing the freezer paper template. And you can go as fast or as slow. You could go slow like this and kind of be watching both, like
looking here to make sure where the needle is piercing, and looking to make sure that the edge of this fabric is on the 1/4 inch. And when you become more proficient at it, you can speed up and just kind of watch that 1/4 inch mark. And you can see how the needle is going right along the edge of that freezer paper template. And then when I get to the end, I stop. And you can see how the thread is right along the edge. And then on this side, you can't really see it. You can kind of see where the holes are for the needle. So I'll do that on another one here. We'll take the greenish one. And so again, what we did is we've put the black fabric on top of the green. And then on the front here, we're folding it so that the paper is folded between the A1 and the A2. And we have that 1/4 inch of fabric along here. And we're going to line it up in our machine. And you start a little bit before the template. And again, I have the edge of the fabric lined up along the 1/4 inch line. I'm going to start slowly to make sure that I clear this point on the template. And then once I do that, I can pay attention to this 2/8 inch line and go a little bit faster, and look every once in a while to make sure that I am indeed clearing the paper template. And just so that you get past that green fabric, because that's the one that's most important here. And actually the green fabric happens to be lined up with this point here, but basically you want to go past the edge of the template there. So again, you can see that I have that black line of thread going right next to the freezer paper template, but not actually piercing the template. And that is how you sew using the freezer paper method, instead of actually sewing on top of the paper. Like if we were to do the normal freezer paper method, when we have these fabrics lined up like this, we would actually put our machine in here like this. I'm not going to actually do it because that would defeat the purpose of what we're doing here, but I'll show you what it would be like. We would take and put it right in here. And then before, outside here in the 1/4 inch, we would actually lower our needle and stitch right here exactly on the line between A1 and A2. And that's how we would do this if we were doing it the traditional. But then what happens is all of this paper is stitched to the fabric, and then you have to pull all the paper out, and that gets to be a little bit cumbersome, and that's part of why people don't like doing paper piecing. But with this freezer paper method, it eliminates having to pull any of that paper out, which is what's so fantastic about it. So next I will show you how we continue to add additional pieces onto our block.
So now the next step is that we have removed the pins. There were pins in here like this, and we've removed them. And we have to fold this paper section so that it's up like this. And then we would take and press our seam, which this is black, so you can't see it unfortunately, but there's a seam right here. We would press it, with an iron, and then we would take and press it, finger press it first, and then press it up this direction, which is going to adhere this black fabric to this section of the freezer paper template. So now I've done that pressing on this piece. You can see that the black fabric is attached to the paper. So now again we're going to take our postcard, and now we're going to put it on the line between A2 and A3 and fold it back. And we'll have to pull this black fabric off of the template and then push that postcard in there nice and good. And we're going to trim off this extra black fabric with our add a quarter ruler. So again, we just push the ruler right up against the edge of the template, just like that. And then we trim that extra black off. So then we open it back up again, and now we're on to the A3 piece right here, which is the center one, which is now going to be another piece of this fabric. And this is a fairly big one, so we're going to use another big piece of fabric on that. And again, we're going to take and we want to make sure that the right side is going to be up when we're done. So we're going to flip this wrong sides onto the, well actually we're going to flip it right sides to right sides. So the two right sides of the black fabric and this pink fabric are meeting each other. And then we take and line the pink fabric up, the edge of the pink fabric, with the edge of the black fabric. And again, I'm going to pin it just like we did before so that it doesn't move while I'm sewing. Sometimes this fingernail method works for me and other times it does not. And so then once we've done that, we're going to take and fold this over again between the A2 and the A3. And you can see that we have a 1/4 inch of fabric showing. And so again, we're going to stitch right next to that paper template. And then we'll do it again with this one, the green with the black that's now been pressed over onto this section of black. It's been pressed over onto the A2 shape. We're now going to turn it this way and get our postcard and put it between A2 and A3 on the line between those two. Fold it over and take and pull the black fabric back so it's not stuck to the template anymore. And then we're going to take and push the postcard in there good. Take our add a quarter ruler, get it all nice and lined up, and trim off that extra black. And there you can see we have it trimmed up. So now basically what's happened is a 1/4 inch of the black, see this line, there's a 1/4 inch of black that's extending into the A3 shape. That's what the trimming up is doing. So now we want to take another larger piece of the green. This is the right side, so we're going to take and put the right side facing the right side of the black fabric and line up the straight edge of this green all the way along with the straight edge of the black. And again, making sure that you place it so that there's going to be fabric covering the entire template. And then I'm going to put pins in it again to hold it while I'm sewing. And then we're going to flip it again between the A2 and the A3, and we're going to stitch right here next to the edge of the paper template all the way along the paper template. And so that sewing is exactly like I just showed you, so I'll go do that and then I'll show you how we add the next pieces on. So you can see that I've stitched this one along here, and basically you can't see it on the black, but stitched right next to the freezer paper template. So now we're going to take and open this up, and again we would press this seam nice and flat, and then we're going to press the fabric over onto that middle section. So we'd finger press it first, and then press it like that. So I've done that on a piece here. It's all pressed. It's adhered to the freezer paper. So now we've done A1, A2, and A3. It's now time to do A4. So we get our postcard again, and we're going to take and pull the fabric away from this and put the postcard right there on the line between A3 and A4. And then we're going to take our add a quarter ruler and trim off this extra. And then we have that little section to cover right there. So now we're going to take a white piece of fabric and make sure that it covers the shape. And I'll show you how the light box can help you with that in just a second. And so we're going to take this, and we want right side to be up, and we're going to flip it so that the right sides are touching each other of the pink and the white fabric, and line it up so that the straight edge of the white is lined up with the straight edge of the pink. And we're going to pin that in place. Then we're also going to do that with the screen one. So see, this is why I work on multiple templates at a time, because the process goes a lot quicker if you're not constantly getting up, from going from the sewing machine to the iron station to the cutting station. So if you're working on multiples at a time, it speeds the process up. So again, I'm putting that on the line between A3 and A4, butting the postcard up against that fold, taking and putting our add a quarter ruler so that the lip is right along that edge of the postcard, cutting the extra off. And then you always have to remember to put the template back up and take another piece of white fabric, make sure it covers that triangle, flip it down so that the right sides are together, get those straight edges lined up, and pin it in place so that you can take it to the sewing machine. So let me show you how the light box helps you determine if you have your fabric covering the piece. So here you can see I have the light box turned on, and we're going to lay our template on here, and we're going to put the white fabric over it, and by doing that you can see through the shadows that you can see that this piece is going to cover and also when you're placing the pieces, you can also look at the lines on the back and see when it's covering it as well. So a light box can be something that can be helpful when you're trying to determine if the piece of fabric you have is large enough to cover the square. So you can see that there's definitely fabric going all the way around there, and also you can see that it's dark here, so that there's definitely a 1/4 inch here as well. So when I flip this like this, there's definitely going to be enough of that fabric to cover the A4 space, which is what we want. So a light box may help you, especially on more intricate paper piecing patterns where
So the sewing is the same even on these small pieces. You can see I have the white piece pinned to cover this A4 space. So we're going to take and turn it over to the line side. Again, if it was regular paper piecing, we would stitch outside of this 1/4 inch along that line between the A3 and the A4 and stitch into the seam allowance there as well. But we're not actually doing the traditional paper piecing, we're doing the freezer paper method. So we fold it back like that, and again we're going to stitch just beyond the freezer paper template and down here past the edge of the freezer paper template. So I'm going to get my thread in place here, Position my piece so that the edge, the right edge here, is along the 1/4 inch line. I'm going to go needle down outside of the edge of the freezer paper template. I'm going to go slow at first to make sure I go past the paper template. And then once I've cleared that, I can pay attention to my 1/4 inch line and go much quicker. Just once in a while I look to see that I'm not piercing the paper. And that's all there is to sewing the small little triangle as well.
So now we have taken and pressed the A4 piece up onto that little corner triangle. So it's now time to add the A5 piece, which is right here. So again, we're going to take our postcard and put it on the line between the A3 and the A4, because the black piece is the next piece that we're adding. And if your postcard doesn't reach all the way like mine doesn't, it's probably best to make sure that it's covering the fine little points down here at the bottom, because the upper part will fold correctly, but you want to make sure those points are as accurate as you can get them. So there we go. We're going to put that postcard in there nice and tight. Take our add a 1/4 ruler, put it up against the fold of the freezer paper template. With the rotary cutter, cut off the excess. And there we go. So now we're ready to add the next piece, which is A5, which is a black piece. And now we can use one of the ones that we cut off. So this will actually, if you look at it and place it so that it's like at a 1/4 inch there, it's definitely going to cover, so that will work. So I'm going to take and put the straight edge of this piece lined up with the straight edge of that pink piece. Just like that. They're all lined up. I'm going to pin it in place. And then we're going to fold that back on the line between the A3 and A5. And we're going to stitch again right along here. And then I'll show you how we add the last piece. So now we have the black piece pressed onto the freezer paper template. We're going to take it to the other side. We're going to get our postcard and place it on the line between A5 and A6. Fold it over and take that black and just pull it away from the freezer paper, and then get that postcard in there good. We'll trim it up. And you can see I don't have a whole lot down here. So by reusing those other strips of fabric, we're not wasting a whole lot. So there's that straight edge. And now we can reuse one of these other pieces that we trimmed. So we're going to, again, make sure that we're going to totally cover the piece. We're going to line up the straight edges of the pink with the straight edges of the black and pin it in place. And then again, we're going to take and fold this on the line between A5 and A6, and we're going to stitch right here next to the freezer paper, and that will be the last piece. And once I've sewn that, I'll come back and show you how we trim up the block. So here they are. They're all sewn up. We have the green one with white triangle, a pink one with the white triangle, and another pink one with the white triangle. And let me show you how we square these up. So now we're going to flip it to this side, and when you probably start out, the first time you're going to have a little extra paper around here, and you're actually going to cut that extra paper off in addition to the fabric. But I'm going to take and line up my straight edge ruler with the 1/4 inch line along this 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to line it up here on the bottom too, and that will tell me that it's nice and straight. And we're just going to trim up that edge. And we turn it around and do the next side. And again, this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so we're going to put the 1/4 inch line of our ruler right along that 1/4 inch line of the pattern and get it lined up and trim up this side. And we're going to do it on this side too, and again I'm going to line up these lines on here because that will tell me I'm nice and straight. And you can tell that you're trimming properly when the dashed lines on the ruler, there's spaces in between, and when you can see like a solid line, that's how you know that you have it lined up correctly on the line. And then this is our last edge right here. We're going to trim this one up, and then I'll show you how easy it is to remove the paper from the fabric. Okay, so it's all trimmed up. Now normally, if this was regular paper piecing, there would be lines of stitching on all of these and here, and we'd have to rip out all this paper in between the stitching. But we're not going to have to do that with this one. So here's what it looks like all trimmed up. I'm just going to take and grab this corner and grab the freezer paper template and just gently peel this away. Now this one's been used a number of times, so it's not as sticky, but it's still working. But you want to pull gently, kind of hold the paper down and pull the paper gently, or pull the fabric gently, because we don't want to stretch it. There could be some biased edges, and so you just have to pull real gently, and it just comes right off the foundation. Got a little bit of extra fabric there. And there's our pattern ready to be used for the next color block. And here is what the back of our block looks like when it's been sewn this way. And here's what it looks like from the front. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add sashing to the side of the blocks, and I'll show you how we do that. So after all of the blocks have been paper pieced, it's necessary to lay them out in a pleasing fashion, and you can see that I have sort of mixed the reddish tones with the green tones and oriented the blocks in the direction that they should be oriented. And I will keep them in this order as I am sewing them together so that I know how they go together. Next I'll show you how we put the sashing in. So the next thing that I lay out are the sashing strips. Those are the black strips in between the blocks. And then there are sashing rows in between those. The white squares in the sashing rows are what are called cornerstones, and there technically could be a black cornerstone in the other intersections. But I've only put the white cornerstones, and then I've chosen to use long pieces of sashing in between the white cornerstones, and this will result in less sewing that ultimately will need to be done. So that's part of the reason why I lay it out, so that I can see what longer pieces don't need to be sewn together and can be one single piece. So the next thing I'm going to do is flip the black sashing strips in between blocks over on top of a block and sew all of those together. And I'll keep them in order in my sewing machine so I know where to put them when I come back to lay them out in the quilt. So this is the bottom row of the quilt, and I've collected these blocks in order. Like this one was almost the farthest right one, and then this one was next to it. So I'm keeping them in order, and I just take the sashing strips that were laying next to it and flip them over, and then I'm going to sew that. Actually, I'll probably sew it this way with the black strip on the bottom, because that will be the easiest way to sew it. And then I will keep these in order so that when I come back to the quilt, I'll know where they belong. These black sashing strips will get pressed towards the black, and then the white cornerstones were also pressed towards the black, so all of these things should nest with each other when they're sewn together. So the quilt top is all done for the Out of This World quilt pattern. You can see that it was created with a variety of batik fabrics, and a black batik and a white batik. And it has a blue border, and that particular fabric is one of the fabrics that's in the quilt. And even though we use the freezer paper method, it looks like our points turned out pretty good, at least upon an inspection from this distance. And that's what I was expecting.
So next up on the Out of This World quilt, I have to decide how I'm going to quilt it. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is, in the center of the sashing, I'm going to do a stitch both directions. And I don't think I'm going to put it in the cornerstone. And in doing that, it's going to help hold the quilt together while I do some other quilting. Then the next thing I'm going to do is start in one of these black triangles and go down like this in the center of it. Come to this point here, go up, go into the center of the sashing, and then down this one to the point, into the next point, and up into the center, down the middle of this one to the point, up the point of this one, and end here. And by doing that, I'm able to do all of that quilting without having to break a thread. So that's how I'm going to quilt the Out of This World quilt. This part is called the basting of the quilt, getting it ready to sew. So I have the backing laying here, which is wrong side up. Then I have a wool cotton batting by Hobbs batting as the center layer, and then this is the quilt top. Now some people like to spray baste. That's where they take like a can of spray and spray between the batting and the backing, and spray between the batting and the top, and that's it's like a spray glue, and it basically holds the layers together. But I live in Florida, so it's hot, so it's hard to do it outside, and plus I don't want those fumes in the house, so I don't typically do the spray basting method. Another way you could do it would be to sew very large seams, stitches, very large stitches throughout the quilt, and that would hold the layers together. But the method that I like the best is using these little safety pins that have like a plastic coating over them, and you just push and make sure that all the layers are nice and flat, and then go down and pull it up, and do it again, go down and come up, And then in order to like not hurt your fingers, you just need some type of a metal object. So I'm using this little needle nose pliers, and I just take and put it on the bottom and then hook them like this. And this is going to hold all of the layers of the quilt together so that when I'm quilting it on my domestic machine, the layers won't slide. So that's why we baste the quilt before we start quilting it on our domestic machine. Well, here's the Out of This World quilt all finished up. It's all quilted. I'll bring it in a little closer so you can see the quilting. I hope you enjoyed this video and like the paper piecing method of using freezer paper as the foundation. I hope you'll give it a try and you'll see how easy it is to do paper piecing and not get frustrated with having to rip all the paper out. Up in the corner you'll see some additional videos of mine that you may want to watch, and if you've enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd give it a thumbs up. And if you'd share it and like it and subscribe to the channel, it'd be greatly appreciated. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.